You're listening to Pop Culture America on Blog Talk Radio. John and Dave, we're talking with Mr. Herb Trimpe, the artist extraordinaire. There's only one Herb Trimpe on this show.
That's right.
So
I came in and I was kind of mid-generation. I came in around the same time Barry Smith and Steranko, and there weren't many people coming in around that time in the mid-1960s. And some of the people that followed, especially Barry and Jim, they more or less began the revolution, I think, that occurred. Aside from Stan's revolution, which really put comics in the headlines in a way. There's a whole bunch of artists that came along that started to see things differently, and it eventually led to things like the X-Men, kind of tertiary or secondary characters at best, at best, being kind of like the foremost comic book title in the world, and all these young guys that came in, they kind of generated the interest because they were allowed to express their own.
Do we, for this conversation, do we just want to call them the Marvel punks? Those punks, it's not those kids.
And I was kind of between. So I came in between sort of the older guys, the guys who grew up in the 30s and 40s doing comics for a living.
Kirby,
a lot of those guys,
Fred Kita, and
Johnny Romita and Buscema and Bill Everett and guys who, a lot of them very fine commercial illustrators. A lot of those guys took work in comics because comics paid when you delivered, and they took the work in place of big commercial jobs just to pay the rent and put the meal on the table, and they were and I kind of followed those guys, and they became my role model. I was not a frontiersman. I was not a person who, was on the cutting edge. I just saw the way these guys operated, and I pretty much appreciated it. And
who? Any major artist that was influenced?
As I came up through high school, EC Comics were producing the kind of 10-cent versions, the adventure stories. Jack Davis, John Severin, George Evans. These guys.
Yeah.
I loved that stuff. I was nuts about that stuff. And Jack Davis was my absolute idol in terms of comic book art. Well, I brought that into Marvel. I mean, I could actually draw pretty good in that style. I had a kind of a cartoony adventure style like Davis did. Well, Stan took one look at that and said, he didn't say it, but the implication was, you got to do it this way, or the highway. You know what I mean? And his way was, in those days, in the mid-'60s, was pure, unadulterated superhero along the Buscema Kirby lines, and Romita. And these guys could freaking draw. And I couldn't draw, which Stan not frequently, but on a couple of occasions reminded me of. But I think he hired me because I could tell a story. I'm a very good storyteller, even to this day.
Wow.
And so, he hired me and he stuck with me. And I just kind of learned on the job. And I would estimate that I was surrounded by everybody who was better than I was.
Now, how did you get the Hulk? How did you land the Hulk job?
I was
Maurice Severin right before you?
Right. I started working there doing some freelance inking on Westerns.
Okay.
And that was kind of petering out, but Sal Brodsky called me one day and he said, "Do you want a staff job?" I was living in Peekskill at the time.
Okay.
Said, "Do you want a staff job? We're gonna get a photostat machine," which is another way of saying photocopy machine, except it really was. It had baths. You had to put the copies in solutions and run them through a dryer and all this. And it's what instead of sending all this stuff out, they used to send. If you needed logos and copies of art or galley copy or anything like that, you had to send them out in order to actually cut and paste. And so they bought this huge machine to do all their copying, and they needed somebody to run it. And do you want a staff job running it at $135 a week? And I said, hell yeah, you know. So I took the job, and I got freelance inking, and Gary and I, Friedrich and I, did a one-shot called The Phantom Eagle, which is the first full-length book I did, and which I understand Marvel is actually reviving.
Wow.
Believe it or not.
Hey.
Yeah, check the internet. And so I worked 6 months or so in the office on the machine and taking home freelance and this, that, and the other thing. And Marie Severin, who was inking the Hulk and Tales to Astonish, it was like that was split between the Hulk and Submariner. And she was kind of moving on to something else, and I guess eventually the Hulk got his own book. And somewhere in there, Stan popped his head in our cubicle one day, because there's only about 10 of us on staff, and said, "Do you want to draw the Hulk?" And I said, "Well, yeah, okay." That's not a. I mean, it's not like, you know. It's just sort of, well, yeah. The boss is asking you to do something. What's the answer? The answer is yes. You know what I mean? I mean, I didn't particularly have a leaning towards the Hulk. In fact, when I first started working there, I didn't know. I mean, I was big on EC guys, but I didn't know Stan from, you know, Jack Kirby or any of those guys. I was not a Marvel fan.
Jack who?
Yeah, Jack Kirby. Jack who? Yeah.
Yeah.
I do Jack David. The first Marvel comic I read or even looked at was about a year before I started working there in 1965. I was in Vietnam.
Yeah.
And one of the guys, his mom was sending him comics, and I remember the issue specifically. It was a Thor, and it was inked by Vinnie Coletta. I didn't know who any of these people were, but I remembered the style. I remember what I was looking at.
Wow.
And when I got back and got familiar with these guys, I said, "Oh, that was Vinnie Coletta that inked that Thor." You know. And I read the damn comic sitting in my tent, and I said, "Damn, this is pretty good."
Now, from the names Vinnie Coletta and Sal Brodsky, I'm thinking these are big lugs. You know, they'd ready, you know, kick some butt. Yeah. Or were they just small schlubs?
Now who? Sal Brodsky?
Sal Brodsky first.
Oh no, he was. You know, he was. I don't know what he was like. The Office. He managed The Office basically.
Okay.
And John Verporten, who I had gone to art school with, he's the one. He was the production chief.
Yeah.
And he gave me a lead when I got out of the Air Force that, hey, maybe you guys could pick up some work at Marvel. And I went up and I talked to Stan, and Stan basically, actually it was Saul that first gave me the inking. But as far as hiring for the staff job, and I got that job. Stan offered that job.
And Vinnie Coletta, was he a nice guy or a tough guy?
Vinnie Coletta?
Quiet, yeah.
Well, when you got Vinnie Coletta, Frank Giacoya, and John Romita together, it was like watching The Sopranos. It was. I mean, these guys were. I mean, Vinnie Coletta was the best, though. I mean, he was a.
This Barry Windsor-Smith. Let's take this guy out.
Huh?
Yeah, this Barry Windsor-Smith dude.
Look good than a brush line is, you know.